In this final video, we're going to be looking at final formats and their uses. So we'll be completing this project out by showing you how to make the final output formats you need. So we'll talk a little bit about different formats that you can generate within Illustrator and also creating the ones that are necessary for finishing this project. Alright, let's get started. So first off, what we need to do is, if you recall from our last video, we went ahead and we did an inspection of the whole project, cleaning up graphics and preparing the file. So the steps that we're going to take inside of this particular video are going to be permanent steps and changes that we make to the project. So what I recommend doing before you get too far into this is to actually go ahead and close out the project and open a copy of it. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out for now. I've already saved it. And I'm going to go back to where my project is stored. So I'm just going to kind of go to that real quick. And here we are. And I'm going to go to where my original document is, and there it is right there. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a copy of it. So I'm going to just do Command C and then Command V. And there's my copy. And we're going to actually take this copy and I'm going to move it into the final folder, because what we're going to do to it is going to be editing that makes it sort of a finalized document. So I'm just going to drag this over here and drop it over my final folder and go in there, and I'm going to open the copy. It's important that we work off the copy and not the original now at this stage. So now reopen that into Illustrator, and we'll let that load up. Very good. Alright, and now we just check on basic things at the very end here. One thing to check for sure is to make sure that our document is the correct size for this stage in the game. So as far as checking out dimensional qualities for your document, we're going to change our mode here into artboard mode. So I'm going to go down on my toolbar, and there's a tool here called the artboard tool. So I'm going to click on that. And when you activate the artboard tool, what it shows you is actually an artboard editor. You can actually use this tool to draw brand new artboards if you want to. Of different sizes and different orientations all over the screen for different purposes. A lot of people use that to create new artboards for transferring artwork onto or duplicating it for things like business cards, stationery, or web graphics of different kinds that use similar graphics over and over again. That way you keep it all together. But what's important in here is that we can identify each of our artboards, and we can actually select them and find out what their dimensions are by looking up here at the top. So I selected this one by just clicking on the empty area, and it tells me that its width and height, which is the numbers I should be looking at, are 17 inches by 11 inches, and that's exactly the right dimensions for your poster. Whether it's 11 by 17 or 17 by 11 is up to you. So whether it's vertical or horizontal, that just depends on your concept. Obviously, for the demonstration file, it should have been a horizontal. And so that's what this screen allows you to work with. I can change its dimensions if I want to right here manually. Or I can also do it by hand by clicking and dragging down here on these handles. And of course, you want to be careful when you do all this stuff in here. You don't want to make too many drastic changes. Also be careful with where you click in here. The moment that you click on another graphic in your design, it will convert that graphic into an artboard all by itself. So if you ever do that, just hit Command Z to undo. Remember, that's the magic keystroke combination inside of any Adobe software. And most Mac software is Command Z to undo a change that you've made. But that's the artboard menu. There's also an artboard panel that's associated with it. If you look over here on your panels, you should see one called Artboards. And this will actually have listed each of your artboards in a specific order. which is important to note if you are actually going to send specific artboards to a print file. you should know which one is which. And as you can see in our design, we have one over here that's our empty document that we played with, and one that's our main document that holds our design. So it's important that you are able to identify which is which. Now, you can always rename them, by the way. If you want to make the artboards more purposeful while you're working with them, you could call one of them poster and the other one could still remain an artboard. But again, the name is only useful inside the Illustrator interface. When you're sending things to print or making separate print files, Illustrator is not going to show you these names. It'll just look at the number of the board, and we'll see that in a little bit. All right. So we got that part taken care of. Our dimensions are good. Now we're going to move on to some more complicated steps here that require flattening of design elements. So I'm going to just switch out of my artboard tool and go back to my arrow tool. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start to do what's called creating outlines or expanding graphic elements inside of Illustrator. So the whole purpose of this step is to keep our graphics from being retranslated or mistranslated inside of another software. Often text is the worst about this. Text can very easily be converted when moving between machines because it can be read whenever it's kept as a raster or as a vector or as a PDF document. The text file can be read through the document. So if the computer that you move this document to does not have the same font that you used, or fonts, then it will automatically convert them into something else, or the nearest system-based font type. And that is not good. And it's a big problem in the print community and design community when things like that occur. So one key way to do that, or keep that from happening, is making a version of your file that has flattened text on it. So we're going to do that. So the easiest way to do it, in my opinion, is just to select everything in your document, and you can get rid of this in maybe 2 steps. So I'm just going to draw a big selection around everything in my document, and I'm going to go up to where it says Type, and we're going to go down to where it says Create Outlines. Now, notice what just happened on screen. Let me hit Command Z so you can just see the difference. See how the type looks right now? I'm just going to redo this. When you convert it into outlines, it just added all these little anchor points around everything. Now, if we recall how Illustrator operates, it uses vectors for designing graphic elements. So what we've just done is we have taken all of our text elements and we have converted them into shapes. So they are now recognized as shape layers inside of Illustrator. This is actually a cool thing that you can do to graphics actually at any time you want to inside of the editing phase while working on a project. So if you have text in your design that you want to go in and actually do some tweaking to the shape of it, you could convert it into outlines like this, and you could grab an anchor point and change its shape very quickly and very easily to get new unique forms. A lot of people do this for, again, creating custom graphics or rearranging letter forms or stretching and skewing them in such a way to help them fit into different spaces, or trim them up and change the way they look. It's a great tool to understand how to use when you create outlines from text. Okay, so we did it once. I'm usually a fan of double checking everything, so I always go in to make sure I can't do it again. That's good. Okay, so that's step 1. Okay, that's protecting your text design in your document from being converted in outside documents. Now, the one thing to remember when you do this task, it is permanent. Okay, I cannot treat these like text files anymore, text elements. I can't go back and retype over them. So when you do text converted to outlines or create outlines from text, it's a permanent job that basically flattens them into shape elements, so they're no longer recognized as text. Okay, so that took care of that, and the next step we want to take care of is doing something called expanding inside the document. Now, you may have heard me speak about expanding prior in a previous video about that with working with image tracing. in order to edit the file or image that result that we created, we had to do what was called an expand process on it so that it could make all of the graphics editable as pathway lines. So we're just going to check that with this. I'm noticing that all of my pattern text in the background and this text have not been changed yet. It doesn't recognize them as individual pathways. So it's reading them as a different graphic element in the design. So we need to take care of that too, because those could easily be converted. Expanding graphics is also a great way to maintain qualities of appearance changes that you've made to a document. Such as adding items in your design that have stroke lines around them. Stroke lines can be converted in outside software. If you're not careful, the shape or the thickness of them could shift. That's one property that you could lock into your design by converting it into an outline path rather than just an appearance property that pops up around the border of a shape. Because if you notice when I look at this rectangle right now, right here, there's no pathway line that goes around the outer edge of the stroke. Notice that? It's on the inside because it's marking the border of the original rectangle that we drew. But the thickness of the stroke was changed, but it doesn't recognize it. So that's a property that's just an appearance that we would have to expand. Now, let's do it with our doc. So I'm going to just select everything again. And this time we're going to go to Object. And then we're going to go down to where it says Expand. So let's click it. And you might get a menu pop up that looks like this, and it asks you which things do you wish to expand in your document. By the way, if you have gradients in your design, it will ask you if you'd like to expand the gradient mesh. I do recommend that because gradients do have limitations. As far as the smoothness of the gradation of one color to another, that can be reduced whenever you're printing the document. So you have to specify how many lines of color change do you want between to make the transition. But we're just going to have the basic expand with these boxes all checked and say OK. Now if we do it once, it might take a minute, by the way, depending on how complex your design is. The more pathways it has to deal with, the longer this process may take. All right, we did it once. Now, again, my rule of thumb, okay, see that? It converted all of that text into path. That's good, but we still have the pattern back here that hasn't been dealt with. I don't want to lose that by chance. So I'm going to go back and do this again. And again, we're just checking our elements. Now, I didn't see it do anything to it, so I'm just going to go into where that text is in my computer layer. Now if I look in here, this subclip group shows me lots and lots of lines, probably all from every piece of pathway text that I have. Yep. So there's a lot of compound pathways is what it's calling them. And that's okay. That just means we have everything accounted for now. All right. Okay. So now we have that taken care of. Yeah, see now I can actually select the individual letter forms if I zoom in here. See how it detects like anchors around each of the pieces? So I can actually go in and I can select the individual letters if I want to. All right, so let's go back out. All right, so now we've taken care of that step. Again, those are two very important steps that I recommend when prepping a file that's a final version of it. You always want to maintain your master file separately after this point. When you're making an output format, it's good if you know you're going to have to flatten or make a drastic change to something that you do it to a copy. All right, so we expanded everything inside the design. We also want to make sure, like you could just check this depending on your design concept, is make sure that graphics, if you have graphics that are meant to fill in the entire background, like if you have a color background for your piece that you've drawn with, say, like a rectangle that's supposed to cover your background and make a background color, right? Make sure that it is full bleed, And when I say that, I mean that it goes past the artboard outline just a little. Most people often forget and then they draw it and it's just barely smaller, and sometimes they miss it by accident. And so then they have random border line that shows around their print. Not good. So again, make sure that you expand that just past the borders of your design so that you can capture the whole thing properly. Now I'm just going to get rid of this because I don't need it. But again, if that applies to your document, if there's a graphic that's meant to be right on the edge, then go ahead and put it just a little past it. Don't risk the chance of a white border. Okay, now we're also going to make sure our color mode is set correctly for our document. So I'm going to go up to Edit, and we're just going to check our color settings. And all this stuff should be fine in here. General Purpose North American, sRGB, for working, color management, this will change. We'll go to File also from the top menu and go down to Color Mode. And we should be in RGB color, by the way. This is the assigned color mode for when you're working inside your document right now. I'm going to go into Document Setup also and just double check things inside there and make sure everything looks good. I'm probably not going to change anything in here because this is just asking me the inches for my design of my document and those kinds of things. So we'll hit Cancel. The only other thing that we might set up is our proof and just make sure that we know what we're working in for our proofing. I'm going to change it to Monitor RGB. And you may notice that actually changes the way that it proves or it proofs colors on screen or tests them. So see the difference between Monitor and CMYK. Completely different color spaces when you do that. The colors shift. So it's using colors that are more appropriate to those methods. So again, we're not going to actually print this document, but we're going to simulate it as though we would really. So we're prepping it in every way as though it would be a print document. So I'm just going to leave it here on Internet Standard RGB. Okay? And that's everything that we need to do for this part. So we're going to go ahead and save this document. So I'm going to go to File, and let me see if I can remember this. I believe you go to Save As. And what we're going to save it as is Adobe PDF. Did I get it right? So I'm going to check my format down here. There it is right there, Adobe PDF. Very good. Now, you may notice there are other formats listed in here. Some of these are good, again, for different types of uses. EPS is kind of a classic, older vector format. A lot of programs will use that across borders, so you could use that if you're moving from Illustrator to something else. SVG is a great format for posting to the web. If you're making graphics for the web, that's a great one to use for outputting that way. General document purposes, for what we're going to do for Exchange, we're going to use Adobe PDF as we have before. And I'm going to save it as a PDF. I'm also going to change this. Look below it. It says all for use artboards or range. I'm going to change the range. Now I only want to use artboard number 1 because that is this artboard. And if you look down here, it actually tells you the number of the artboard that you're currently selected on. So that's number 1. Again, you can always review artboard also from the artboard panel when you're inside of Illustrator, and that can tell you which artboard is which by it'll highlight around the edges. Alright, so I want number 1, save it to my final folder, and I'm going to take off the word copy from the end of it, and that should be all I need to do for that, and we're going to hit save. Now when you save a PDF, it will pop up additional options. So that you can make sure that you have all your PDF settings correct. A couple notes here as far as saving the PDF file from Illustrator. Number 1, uncheck this box for Preserve Illustrator Editing Capabilities. You do not need to do that for a PDF file. It just makes it bigger and a larger file. So that's not necessary. Go to Compression. You shouldn't have any compression applied. It should be set to none. Don't think there's anything else you need to do in here. Marks and bleeds you don't need to really mess with. but they do allow you to add things like color test bars or trim marks on the paper. Those are interesting printer's marks that you can add. Output, usually it'll ask you if you want to convert it to a destination color profile, or if you prefer to profile inclusion. So it'll tell you that no profiles will be embedded in the PDF. Use this if the application or output device that will use the PDF doesn't need to translate it into another color space. So if you want to include the profiles, you might want to change it to include all profiles or include all RGB tag source CMYKs. So I'm just going to leave it on include all. And that's all I really need to do in here. And I'm going to save the PDF. And don't worry, it's just warning you that you didn't preserve Illustrator editing. But you don't need to do that for a final output file. Save it as the format that you know you're going to print it from. Okay. And then we're going to check our homework here and make sure that we have our PDF. And we always view the PDF to make sure everything looks all right. So I'm just going to review it and make sure that it looks okay. If it doesn't, then I need to go back and make sure things look okay. All right. Judging by the file that it pulled up in front of me right now, it looks like everything came out correctly. My PDF looks good, my text looks appropriate, nothing is converted incorrectly, and there are no random graphics showing up in my PDF file. This is important. So there you have it. That is how you create your final formats from Adobe Illustrator. Again, if you look inside Illustrator, there are also ways when you're saving that you can also export. If you go into export, you look in here, there are other external formats that you can access. A lot of your pixel-based raster formats are listed here, so if you ever want to direct print into a printer that doesn't accept a vector file format, then you can convert or save a copy of your Illustrator document as something like a PNG, a bitmap, or even a JPEG. And they have some other formats you can also save as like Photoshop or a TIFF as well. So those are all listed under the export section of Illustrator whenever you're dealing with that part of document saving. So again, if there's things in Illustrator we didn't talk about, again, I'm sorry, we only have so much time to cover things in here. You are more than welcome, of course, to review the software for yourself, get deep into what it does. Check out on Adobe and see all the different capabilities. There are many tools over here we did not have time to review or look at. But I've given you a taste of all the important tools that are inside of this particular software to get you kick-started, which is the important part. All right. Take care. If you have questions, please email. Otherwise, check up on the helps related to Illustrator or watch these videos again for getting more familiar with the software. Take care.